Hey, welcome back to my channel. I'm Erica and I appreciate you being here. Today we are going to be talking about a lot of books. More specifically, we're going to be talking about some of the upcoming releases for quarter three for this year that I'm looking forward to. This is not a comprehensive list of all of the books coming out in the third quarter because we would probably be here for days, because there's so many books that come out every quarter. So these are just the books that I've seen announced that I'm interested in right now to either be buying or checking out through the library. There's probably inevitably going to end up being even more books that because I check like 8 different places online, and yet I still find throughout the year that there's books that get announced and get released that I'm still not aware of, despite how much I check what books are coming out. So I will be putting the titles like here so you'll be able to see them, and we'll talk a little bit. These are only in alphabetical order, not like an order of, you know, how excited I am, because I have quite a few titles that we're going to talk about today. So I tried to put them in alphabetical order. Apologies ahead of time if they end up not being in alphabetical order, but they're going to be somewhat close to alphabetical order. So let's get started. The African Samurai is supposed to be a historical fiction novel about the only samurai ever from Africa. My cat is now right here, and she might take the opportunity to make an appearance in this video. We'll see how it goes. But yes, historical fiction about, I believe it's the only African samurai, and I believe it was the first foreign-born samurai. I don't think that I've read any fiction about foreign-born samurai, so I'm hoping this will be something unique that I can get into. The Apology. This one first caught my attention when I was looking at it because it's about an elderly woman in South Korea. She ends up dying, and then she has to spend her initial time in the afterlife. She's trying to break this curse that's been like plaguing her family, and more specifically, it sounds like it's a result of a lot of really serious, impactful secrets that are being kept within her family. Sounds like things like illegitimate birth, different traumas that have happened and things being kept secret. So this ghost is trying to help her family from the great beyond. This one is definitely going to be high on my list for what to read in Q3. The Art of Destiny is scheduled for release. This is the sequel to The Art of Prophecy, and I do have The Art of Prophecy. I actually just got that recently. I got the really beautiful special edition from the Broken Binding. I've been waiting to read that one until at least one of the other books would come out. This one is scheduled to come out in September, so I'll probably be trying to read both of those together later this year. Bored to Death. Now this one, I don't know, this might not be noteworthy to a lot of people, but I saw it and it just struck me as amusing and cute. It's listed on Goodreads as a cozy mystery, which I really like to read those as books that I read like when I'm about to go to sleep, because I read in bed for a little while and then I go to sleep. So I usually like stuff it's just going to be like something relaxing, something enjoyable. I don't want anything that's going to stress me out. This one seemed like it's just going to be a murder mystery that takes place surrounding a board game shop, which I will totally try something like that. I love board games. I love cozy mysteries. I love murder mysteries. We'll see if it's something that I'll be able to add to my bedtime reading list. The Bonus Room. I did see in the description this was previously printed with a different title. I didn't look further into it, as maybe it was possibly published as part of an omnibus or something. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm including this as a new release because I hadn't heard of the original one before. I think the original one was, let me look, Bedbugs. I got my laptop here, so pardon me if I'm looking down. Also, pardon my hair. I got some weird stuff going on today. Whatever. So The Bonus Room is supposed to be like a suspenseful thriller, Hitchcockian kind of a story about things that seem to start going terribly wrong once this couple buys their dream home, and it sounds like it might be supernatural or it might just be some human weirdness going on. I'm not entirely sure. I'm open to it either way, although I do personally love a haunted house story, but since it's described as Hitchcockian, my guess is that it's probably not going to be supernatural, but that's okay. Give me a suspenseful Hitchcockian type story about a dream home gone wrong. The Center. It's described as a dark comedy mystery. It's about a Pakistani translator living in London who winds up in this language school that claims they can teach anyone language fluency within 10 days. So our main character attends this school and soon finds out there's kind of a costly trade-off, I guess, in order to obtain this fluency. It's a debut novel, and it's a unique, it sounds like a unique plotline. It's definitely going to be one that is going on my TBR pretty much right away when this one comes out. Counting the Cost by Jill Duggar. I don't normally read very many memoirs. It's extremely rare that I will, and I wasn't ever a person that watched any of the Duggar shows when they were on TV, but I do have kind of a fascination with fundamentalist religious cults. Let's call it what it is. And so the Duggar family, from that respect, has always interested me, learning about the indoctrination and the really rigid belief systems that they had and still have. Many of them still do. I think it's Jill and maybe only one of the other Duggars that are actually out, like, away from their family now. But anyway, and I just watched Shiny Happy People when it came out. I binged that in like a day. It was extremely well done if you're interested in learning about, you know, a fundamentalist modern day religion and the kinds of just abuse and really harmful things that go on with that kind of fundamentalist thinking. I would urge you to give that documentary a watch. Of course, Fundy Fridays made an appearance, you know, in the documentary, which was awesome to see. So check it out if you're interested. I am going to be reading this memoir from Jill. I'll just borrow this from the library. I'm sure it's going to have a massive wait list from my library. So I'm not entirely sure when I'll actually get to read it, but I am going to put it onto my library, my hold list, to try to, you know, at least get in line for it as soon as my library has a wait list available. Dark Water Daughter. This is going to be a fantasy, and it sounds like it's going to be really fun, and it involves pirates. That alone, I accept my compulsion to read pirate things. So I'm for sure that this was going on my list no matter what. It's a woman who has some magical abilities. It sounds like she can kind of control weather, has some destructive magical abilities. She teams up with a disgraced naval officer, and they decide to go up against this immensely powerful pirate lord. It sounds like this might be the first in a series. I was kind of hoping, based on the description, that it was just going to be a standalone, because I feel like we don't get nearly enough standalones anymore, at least outside of like literary fiction, which I don't read very often. So I mean, maybe it'll be an amazing series and I'll be super happy with it, don't get me wrong, but at this point I'm in the middle of so many series. I really need some standalones, because I literally have a spreadsheet at this point to track my series. Like, that's where we're at. That's where we're at in the world. I have to have a spreadsheet to track my reading in various series. Fever House. Can you see my veil of Maya? All right, I'm metal today. I mean, my soul is metal every day, but when I see a book cover that's like throwing up the horns, of course I'm gonna read it. Honestly, don't even care what it's about. But this is supposed to be a horror story about a severed hand with dark powers, and I love the monkey's paw. I really am very interested to read kind of a darker version of the monkey's paw. I think that's going to be really fun. I don't know that this actually involves this severed hand granting wishes. It sounds like it might just be causing bad things to happen for the people who possess it or are around it. I want a higher level of horror in this story, so I hope that it lives up to the cover. The Fraud is historical fiction, apparently based on a real story that happened in the 1800s in England. It's going to tell the story of someone who's claiming to be a person they're not, or are they? Are they the person they claim to be? presumably the book will answer that question. This person has come forward to claim the inheritance of an estate, so I'm very interested to read this one. The guest room. Our main character rents out a spare room in her house and then decides to start going through the personal belongings of the people she rents the room to. She becomes really focused on this, and one of the guests that she ends up having, she starts to become really suspicious and ends up not knowing if the guest is also spying on her or not. It sounds like this one is supposed to be a thriller, and I'm hoping it will also be kind of fun, because I feel like this is a setup that would lend itself to not taking itself too seriously, so I'm kind of hoping that it doesn't. Maybe the author will have fun with it. The Handyman Method, A Story of Terror. This is yet another story that's going to be like haunted house, new people move in, things are going wrong, but this one does sound like it might be a haunted house story rather than just like mysterious thriller weird stuff going on. It sounds like this one might be haunted house. Love a good haunted house story. I'm always on the lookout for a good haunted house story. I always hope that an author will deliver a good haunting for me. Hemlock Island. Our main character ends up renting out her, it sounds like a vacation home, and weird stuff starts happening. So I believe that she ends up going to the island. There's some creepy, horror, supernatural, mysterious stuff going on, and they're investigating it. They may or may not discover a body. It's unclear. And then they find out that their only way to get off the island is no longer viable. So they're stuck on this island with something or someone that feels a little murderous. My cat just started doing parkour. Sorry. Anyway, The Hexologists. This will be a fantasy mystery about a married couple who works to solve magical mysteries. That sounds so much fun. Like, doesn't it? Come on. And I know that this is by Josiah Bancroft, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people looking forward to this one. The main character's focus on this book, I believe, is going to be trying to solve a magical mystery with the royal family and kind of encountering anti-royalists and going about how to expose different, like this big secret within the royal family and solve this magical mystery. I think this one will be really fun. The Horoscope Writer. The plot for this one struck me as being pretty unique, where our main character becomes a horoscope writer, as the title implies, and gets an email with 12 like pretty gnarly horoscopes that the demand is the horoscopes all need to be printed, and if they're all printed, only one of the gruesome horoscopes will come true, but if they don't get printed, then all of them will come true. So we focus with the main character on investigating who might be the author of these horoscopes and who might be acting out these gruesome scenarios for what apparently the horoscopes are describing. How can I help you? This is categorized as a suspense story about two librarians. Well, I don't know if they're actually librarians, but two women who work in a library. One is a failed novelist who's come to work in this library on the staff, it sounds like, to kind of pick up the pieces of her career, right, and move forward. The other woman used to be, like, secretly used to be a nurse who apparently had a lot of untimely deaths in her wake at her job and is now working at this library, but like nobody knows that that's her history. Until one day, I guess one of the library patrons dies, and the character Patricia, who's the failed novelist, starts to suspect Margot, the former nurse. And so they kind of maybe start playing a cat and mouse game. Patricia starts kind of investigating, digging deeper into maybe who Margot really is and what might actually be going on. This is another one where I think the author could probably have some fun with it. So while it's listed as a suspense, I'm kind of hoping that this is one that also doesn't take itself too seriously. Inanna, and I really hope that I'm pronouncing this correctly, but obviously you can see the cover and draw your own conclusions on the pronunciation. This is listed as a retelling of the Epic of Gilgamesh. I read the Epic of Gilgamesh probably like 20 years ago. I have to admit that I don't remember it. The synopsis for this lists a bunch of gods at war, not God of War, although I do love God of War. This is different, gods at war, and I believe it's going to be the first in a trilogy of the retelling of this epic. In these hallowed halls, it's a dark academia anthology. I think that maybe there's like 12 authors that are involved in this. I enjoy dark academia, and I'm trying to look for more books that have like either are a short story or like a collection of short stories. So maybe this one will deliver for me. Jezebel. I think this book might be the debut novel by this author. I would have to double check, but I think that it's what it is. So it basically is self-explanatory. It's going to be a mythological retelling of the story of Jezebel. I love a well-done retelling of, you know, an old story. So this one will be yet another modern retelling on my list. Killers of a Certain Age. This title alone made me chuckle. I was like, And then I started reading the synopsis. It's going to be a story about 4 women in their 60s who have spent something like 40 years as assassins in this organization of assassins. They're supposed to be retiring, so they get sent on this trip, and then they realize they're now kind of marked but from their organization as being the targets of an assassination, very reminiscent of like Burn Notice, the TV show. So I really hope that this one's going to be a funny, action-packed kind of a book. I think that it has so much potential. I love seeing non-traditional characters in roles. How often do we see senior citizen women as like James Bond kind of characters? So for sure, this one is going on my TBR. The Last Devil to Die. This is going to be the 4th book in the Thursday Murder Club series. I have enjoyed the Thursday Murder Club series. I'll probably do a reread because I haven't read the 3rd one. I bet because I knew that this one was coming out. So when this one comes out, I'll probably just do a reread starting from the beginning because, gosh, I read the first book like right when it came out, so it's even been a long time since I read that. So probably take the opportunity with this release to just reread the entire series because they're pretty fast, they're fun. I love the tone of this author's books with this series, so it would be fun to just sit down and do kind of a casual, relaxing reread of all the books. Mammoths at the Gates. This is going to be the 4th book in the Singing Hills cycle. I did read the first 2, and I decided to hold off on reading further until the 4th one comes out because I feel like this series, I'm probably going to have a different opinion of it if I can read all of the stories at once. So once the 4th book comes out, I'll probably reread the first 2 because they're just short stories. They went really fast as reads, and then I will finally be able to have a formal opinion about this entire Singing Hills cycle. Mother Daughter Murder Night. This is going to be a like murder mystery whodunit about a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter who team up to solve a mystery. They team up as like amateur sleuths, and this one I think is going to be another one that I add to like my bedtime reading list. But also it's supposed to take place in Northern California, and like I'm from Northern California, so I am indeed a sucker for reading books set in Northern California. It's one of the things that I accept. Actually, I'm reading a book right now that's set in Northern California, and while I'm not particularly enjoying the book, I love seeing the little things that are familiar to me. Is it kind of silly? Yeah, it kind of is, but I accept it's just something I enjoy seeing, so I'll be adding this one to my bedtime reading list. Mrs. Plansky's Revenge. This is going to be a funny mystery about a retired woman in Florida who gets scammed. She falls for the scam where she gets a phone call. The person on the call is pretending to be, I think it's her grandson, claiming that he needs money. So she sends money, and unfortunately it's a scam because it's not actually, you know, her grandson. So instead of just accepting that there's not really anything that can be done, you know, in these kinds of cases, unfortunately, so much of the time, our main character takes it upon herself to start investigating where her money went, who scammed her. It sounds like it takes her on a global a global investigation. She sets out on a trek around the world to hunt down the people who took her money. And I think this one, it says it's supposed to be funny as well. So again, I love a book that will amuse me, and I'm excited for yet another mystery to add for this quarter. The Navigating Fox. This is going to be a story that includes not just humans, but what the publisher is describing as knowledgeable creatures. So it'll be animals that, you know, can think and communicate on a high level. We're going to be following a fox that's a navigating fox, like this fox leads expeditions. Sounds like led an expedition to a really bad end by accident, and so now in order to redeem himself, this fox is going to lead a new expedition of both humans and animals, and they're going to go on an expedition to the gates of hell. Don't know why they're going to the gates of hell, and I don't even care. It sounds like it's going to be a story that I'm going to like, so I'm going to read it. The Never-Ending End of the World. The synopsis sounds, when it even says it is reminiscent of The Last of Us. We follow the main character who, in a post-apocalyptic world, she lives in Manhattan, where she is a scavenger, and she's surrounded by people that are caught in a time loop where they just keep like reliving the same small period of time over and over. She's not stuck in that loop. She can see that they are. So she's just solitary, you know, living her life, scavenging for the things that she needs. She isn't aware of anyone else like her who's not stuck in that loop, and she decides one day to venture out and discover if she is in fact the only person that's left. Is she the Last of Us, but not infringing on that franchise? I'll read it. I love The Last of Us TV show. I mean, and not just because of my love of Pedro Pascal, though I do love him. I thought that, I mean, just like millions of other people, I thought that show was so exceptionally well done. I haven't played the games because I do love to play video games, but The Last of Us just wasn't really the kind of game that I typically would gravitate to. I like RPGs. But I might, actually. I was talking to a friend of mine. He really loves The Last of Us games, too. And I told him, you know, after watching the show, maybe I will just play the games for the story. And even though the gameplay style is not really what I would normally go to, I am drawn to games that have a really good story. So anyway, we're not talking about The Last of Us here. This new book is not The Last of Us, okay? Even though the main character might be the last of people. But I'm going to add this sci-fi book to my list. Red Rabbit. This will be a horror story about a group of bounty hunters that are out looking in the dangerous wilds for a witch that is wanted dead or alive. Apparently in the wilds there's demons, creatures. It is touted as a horror story, so I'm assuming that in between seeing what happens with like the conflicting personalities, we're also going to get maybe some fighting with these dangerous creatures that are out there. The September House, yet another book that I've added that is supposed to be a haunted house story. Didn't realize how many of those I put on my list until we've started going through them here. Need I say more? Apparently the walls in this book are dripping blood at some point, so Presumably the house is haunted, and we'll see if it delivers something satisfying. Silver Nitrate. I do enjoy this author, and that was the primary reason that I added this one to my list. This is going to be a horror story about two people that get involved with a film director who he has a history of having magical film, like the physical film itself is magic. So when the two main characters get involved with this guy, they start realizing some creepy magic stuff happening with them. So they spend the book trying to solve the mystery of the magic and like the occult magic that's happening and what is actually going on with this director and like the curse that surrounds it. Spin a Black Yarn. This is going to be a collection of novellas from the author of Bird Box. They're going to be horror and speculative fiction. I did add this one purely because I enjoyed Bird Box. The Square of Sevens, and I do have to say the cover for the UK I think looks way cooler than the one that I've seen for the US. That's the case so many times. The UK seems to get really cool covers. But anyway, this story is going to follow a girl in the 1700s in England. She and her father travel around. Her father is a fortune teller. He ends up handing her over to the care of a scholar, and then her father unfortunately dies, like pretty much right away. The rest of the book, the daughter, our main character, she spends her time trying to figure out who her mother was. There's a lot of mystery surrounding her mother. It sounds like her mother is dead as well. And so our main character goes all over England trying to solve this mystery of, you know, who she is, how her mother died, you know, a kind of a journey of self-discovery. This one sounds really fascinating because it's supposed to be fantasy and mystery and historical fiction all in one. Starter Villain. Did I add this one to my TBR before I even read what it was about, purely because there's a cat in a suit on the cover? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I don't know how many times I have to say, if a cat is on the cover of a book, I'll probably read it. I just will, because if a cat is important enough to put it on the cover, then it's probably going to play a significant role in the book, and like, I want to read about cats. This is going to be a science fiction, fantasy, and funny book about a main character who inherits his uncle's supervillain business. And apparently there's cats involved. Yeah, I'm gonna buy this book. The Stranger Upstairs. Yes, it's another haunted house book. This is supposed to be like a horror, mystery, gothic book about a woman who moves into a home, starts doing some remodeling, and the house seems to get more angry the more remodeling that she does. The Sun and the Void. This book is going to tell the story of two different women, and it sounds like it will be told in like separate narratives. I'm not entirely clear based on the description if they actually know each other or not. I'm sure they're tied together somehow, but it's going to follow the story of Raina, who is not a magic user, but her grandmother is a sorceress, and so she relies a lot on her grandmother for like protection. Raina also begins interacting with a god and like doing the god's bidding. Eva, on the other hand, is a magic user, but this is completely secret because apparently where she is, magic is evil. It's like the result of a dark god. So she is desperately trying to suppress her magic in order to fit in with her family. I'm assuming we're going to see these dueling narratives through the story and it's going to tie together somehow, but the overall messaging seems to be two women trying to find their place in their family and in the world. Son of Blood and Ruin. This is going to be a fantasy historical fiction about a woman who is part of the Spanish court. I don't know that it's in Spain though. It does sound like it's going to be in South America. And so she's promised to the heir of the Spanish throne. But while she's a lady of the court, she has a secret identity as Pantera, who, you know, she's like super magical. She's a hero of her people, and that is her secret identity, and the worlds are going to collide. An ancient prophecy of destruction reveals itself, and our main character is going to have to decide to give up Pantera, or the prophecy is going to play out in an unpleasant way. I'm pretty excited for this one. I feel like there's a lot of potential to turn this into a really compelling series. The Sunset Years of Agnes Sharp. This initially kind of looked like it was going to be a little cozy mystery, but oh no. I think it will be very amusing, but it is not traditional for sure. So a group of seniors in a home, they one day get a visit from a police officer who's working to solve a murder. The seniors, it turns out though, are secretly just relieved to find out that the murder that's being investigated is not the one that they have committed and whose body they are themselves hiding at the moment. So these seniors take it upon themselves to solve the murder the cop is investigating so they can try to pin their own murder on that person as well. I think this one is going to be very amusing, and absolutely I love something that's unique. Like I said, something that does a twist on what you would normally expect. THORN HEDGE by T. KINGFISHER. I read the synopsis and it's clear that just like most of T. KINGFISHER's books, I think the synopsis doesn't really give you a good idea of what the book is actually going to turn out to be, because even from the one that I read and I've gotten into a second one, like these synopses only, like you only brush the tip of the iceberg with it. So if you like kind of a twisted fairy tale, it sounds like this is going to be another twisted fairy tale from T. KINGFISHER. I for sure had fun reading her book, Nettle and Bone. That was what I started with. And, you know, that was also a twist on traditional fairy tale. And I am firmly in the camp now of pretty much I will agree to read anything by T. KINGFISHER. Unquiet. This is a fantasy gothic horror story about a woman in 1800s England. She lives in, it sounds like a large family home by herself. Like there's a maid there, but the rest of her family is apparently out like traveling the world. So she lives there by herself. She really misses her brother-in-law who died about a year earlier. So one day she's minding her own business and her brother-in-law suddenly reappears, and he has no memory of what happened, like with his accident, no memory of where he's been for the last year since he died. So the main character takes it upon herself to investigate. She ends up, you know, having to travel around to find out what happened, you know, and a lot of like dark secrets becoming unearthed in the process. This one sounds like it's going to be really atmospheric, which I love reading books like that in the fall. So even though that when this is coming out this summer, I will probably save it until the weather is colder, because I really do. I am total stereotype. I love to just like, when it's cold in the fall, I sit in my house, I'm like bundled in blankets, the lights are dim, and I'm just like reading a scary story. Vampires of El Norte. This is a horror western with vampires, and it takes place in 1840s Mexico. I don't really need to know more than that. It's going to be a bunch of cowboys in the 1800s going up against vampires. The Weaver and the Witch Queen. This is going to be a fantasy historical fiction set in Norway during the Viking Age. We're going to follow three sisters in a world where magic is real and they've sworn a blood oath to each other. One of the sisters goes, leaves town to follow like a witch and learn the ways of the witch's magic. The other two sisters remain, but one day there's like a Viking raid, and so one of the girls, her farm is destroyed. The other girl is like kidnapped by the Vikings. So they are all bound by their blood oath, you know, to be loyal to each other and protect each other, you know, forever. And so the story is going to follow the three sisters on this adventure and their bond and the magic and the ways in which, you know, they rescue and love and support each other. And I hope that there's a lot of really cool fantasy and magic in between. What you are looking for is in the library. This is a Japanese story that I believe was actually published a few years ago, but I think that it's being announced now here in this list because I think it's the first English translation that's being published, but please, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. That's just my understanding. This is going to follow a librarian who has the ability to read the souls of the guests that come into the library, and she can see like what they're struggling with in life, what their needs are right now, and she knows like the perfect book recommendation to help them out. This one also has the bonus of having a cat on the cover, which again, I'm probably always going to read a book that has a cat on the cover. Wolf Song, the upcoming release from TJ Klune. It sounds like this will be the first in a new series from this author. It's going to follow the main character who's a human and kind of has a difficult home life with his own family. And so starts growing close to the family next door, who turns out they're shapeshifters, and, you know, kind of becomes really connected with them, finds new family with them. Probably going to be heartwarming in some way because I feel like that's what this author is known for. The Woodkin. This will be a horror story that follows a hiker on the Pacific Crest Trail. The main character is, you know, hiking one day along this trail, pretty solitary, and comes across the body of another hiker. So takes a detour to a small town to, like, you know, report what he's found, but like nobody seems interested. So our main character starts feeling like things are a little weird, and then gets stuck at night on a part of the trail and starts feeling really uneasy, really creeped out, paranoid, and like something else is out there with him, and, you know, pursue just like all the other hikers that go missing or get hurt on the trail, starts to think maybe he is next. We'll see. That is the last book that we have on this extremely long list. Thank you for sitting through this whole thing with me. Let me know your thoughts about any of these books that I've mentioned today that are going on my TBR. Do you have any that I've talked about that are on your TBR too? Maybe you've got other books that I didn't talk about that you're excited to read in the quarter three. Let me know that too. But yeah, this was quite a long list. I think I'm hopeful we're gonna have some good releases coming up here. As always, I do appreciate you coming by today. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to click the like button, and you can subscribe to my channel for more content like this. I'll see you next time. Thanks.